Namaskar and good evening. This is Aparna Saini and we've got here Norman Kochannek reporting for ABP News from Sydney Cricket Ground. In fact, अभी हम लोग खड़े हैं at Allen Davidson Gates और इसी के साथ यहाँ से बहुत बड़ी खबर आ रही है. Breaking news on those 5 Indian cricketers that has been accused of in breach of biosecurity protocols. Well, those 5 cricketers were obviously Rohit Sharma, who has just अभी मेलबर्न पहुंचे हैं और उन्होंने ज्वाइन किया है, और साथ में थे शुभमन गिल, ऋषभ पंत, पृथ्वी शॉ and Navdeep Saini. Well, we'll ask Norman Kochannek what are his thoughts and what is his take from an Australian perspective, because this was released in Australian media of that viral video first.
Well, look, the Indian players in question, the 5 players in question, in fact, had not broken any protocols. They followed exactly the guidelines. They were allowed to exit the hotel. They were allowed to go to the restaurant in question. They were also allowed to eat there. And they were certainly allowed to be a part of the restaurant, but they were meant to be outside. That was the only proviso that's questionable. They were meant to be outside, but it actually was raining quite heavily. They then went inside because of the rain. So quite frankly, they haven't broken any protocols specifically. Okay, there was a video produced, placed on Twitter, showing them there, the person in question. He then stated that he had paid for the meal and actually stated that he hugged them, which was false. The reality was that there was no such thing. There was no hugging that went on. He kept his distance. He certainly did take the video, but there was no consequence from that point onwards. So effectively, the 5 people, the 5 players in question, have had to be separated in a form of quarantine. They're kept in isolation. They'll be able to be in the hotel and train, but separately from the rest of the players until further notice. Now that's maybe considered a significant matter, but it won't detract from their training and their ability to prepare for the game. So there's not a true breach, and it's been confirmed by a number of reports that it wasn't a true breach. But Cricket Australia has every right to follow the protocols of investigating what actually happened.
Yeah, that's true. And those 5 cricketers, as we named before, has said clearly that we bilkul sahयोग देंगे, and we're very happy to in support of full support for whatever Cricket Australia has decided for them to isolate separately apart from the other Indian teams. Well, on that note, we'll ask Norman Kochannek one more question. That's the other breaking news, that the 4th test match that was scheduled, जो कि गावा में खेला जाना था, पर वो SCG में शिफ्ट हो सकता है, and in fact 3rd and 4th test could be played at SCG here. So what are Norman's thoughts? We'll ask him. Norman, what are your thoughts that there might be, there's news out there that a 4th test might be played at SCG?
Now, it's a very interesting point, Aparna. The reality is that the Indian team, and I must make this clear up front, are not reluctant to play the 4th test match, nor are they reluctant to play it in Brisbane. The reality is, because of the COVID-19 quarantining, it has certainly reached a point where the players would certainly like to look at options of where they could play the 3rd and 4th test. Now, at this point, they're going to be playing the 3rd test here behind us, behind the Allen Davidson Gates at the SCG. But the potential is that the 4th test will follow on the 15th of January here as well. Reason being, going to Brisbane, in particular the Queensland government, have got very severe protocols beyond what New South Wales have got about the way they handle any of the COVID clusters that we have here, their outbreaks. They will put India under a virtual stronghold of a quarantining that's beyond what is necessary, which will lead to problems preparing for the match, and the mental issues of players is clearly at stake as well. So both Australian and India, not India, it's just both teams.
Both teams.
Now I must just make this point though, if they do play both the 3rd and 4th test here, well, there's very much a strong reason for that, and it's a very clever reason, a very good reason, not based on tactics or pitch performance at all. I don't believe that. It's in fact purely for the sake of a better format for the game. We've had a wonderful series, everything's gone to plan, and quite frankly this will be a small change which would be applauded by both, I think, the BCCI, Australia, and both teams.
Exactly right. Well, I agree with Norman on that note. And a very controversial question that I'm going to ask Norman, and I think all Indian fans out there would want to know. Well, Norman, do you think that this 5 Indian cricketers being accused of the biosecurity rules has come after the comeback that Indian team has made without Virat Kohli and Sharma, which Australia was obviously not expecting, and it was a remarkable comeback? So is that something that has given a bit of a hype up just to make sure those 5 players might not be included in the third test match and then can be obviously upper hand for Australian cricket team.
I'd hope not. I hope not. But you know what? Australia could be very cleverly thinking that. I doubt it, but I'm sure they would love those 5 players to not be in the team, and especially like Gill, Punt and Sharma. Particularly important. Sure, it hasn't been in calculations. Saini's not quite in calculations either.
Yep.
But the reality is 3 of those 5 players will play a significant part in this game and the 4th match. So Australia would love that to be the case. I'm sure that's not the situation. Stay tuned. I think they'll play.
Yeah, and instead of Umesh Yadav, because he's injured, I think there is a news that instead of Navdeep Saini, Shardul Thakur might be included. So, well, they've got a lot of players to watch out. Well, keep watching. We'll bring you any other further updates as soon as we have any confirmations. Well, on that note, this is Aparna Saini with Norman Kochannek reporting for ABP News from Sydney Cricket Ground.